The concept of original sin has been a smoking point for atheists over the years, and may have contributed to the splitting of the church on multiple occasions. However, after listening to a number of high-profile atheists and anti-theists expounding on their take on the subject, I wonder if original sin is what people are saying, and whether it's even biblical or not. Since this is primarily a Catholic concept, and my partner being Catholic, she understands this, this does not necessarily mean that it needs biblical backing, but this is harder to pin down because of this. But since it is exactly that, I need to take the time to look into this topic and find out the true meaning of original sin. So please join me as I share this search with you. This verse sprang to my attention when J. Mike from the atheist community of Austin mentioned his theist friend having a child and having to look on that tiny innocent baby like they were trash or disgusting. Well, a newborn baby is never a pleasant thing to look at, fresh out of the womb, and to describe them as ugly may be perfectly fine, to describe them as trash or disgusting, just like that, is highly abhorrent. Especially when it's clearly meant to be their character that you're judging. This is what I'm looking for in this video, and seeing if this is even remotely true in Christian law. A simple search on the topic yields multiple biblical references that apparently back it up, but on closer inspection, they seem to have similar aspects to atheist posts that simply support their own views. Namely, they can be explained away, or at least mitigated, very reasonably. The first is Genesis 3, which is the original sin of the Bible, though few people agree on what that sin was. I've already done a video on that to explain my viewpoint. This shows that man is susceptible to the influence of the devil and isn't very good at taking accountability for their actions, blaming others when they are wrong and not taking accountability for any of their wrongdoings. Whilst it's sadly commonplace in our society, this is unfortunately not an example of original sin, but the original sin, which is a big difference. Romans chapter 5 verse 12 to 21 is said to compare Adam and Jesus to show the fall of man and that we share Adam's sin. Given that people of the time were always keen to make themselves look better than the rest, holier than thou and all that, this does share some similarities, but neither imply that infants carries this sin at birth. Ephesians chapter 2 verse 3 apparently states that humans are by nature children of wrath. This was clearly not agreed upon by translators, since some say we were by nature deserving of wrath, and others saying by our very nature we are subject to God's anger. Little is said to help understand the interpretation of this verse in this regard, though some imply that reference to being lustful and doing what we like meant this way, so not quite implying that it was there from birth, especially since the term tekna merely means child or offspring, as in descendant, not a young child. The term was even used when Jesus was addressing the paralysed man. Therefore, I'm not sure this verse puts the blame on the infants, or not. Proverbs 22 verse 15 states, "Foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child." However, the Hebrew term, which I know I'm going to butcher, Ivlith translates to foolish or silly. One might imply this can mean mischief, which, as both a little brother and an uncle, I know children can get up to. However, the rest of the verse shows this requires discipline. Therefore, one can take it to mean not obeying the rules or causing disruption. Not exactly a mortal sin, but nearer to something that will have consequences, like being cheeky or touching a hot stove. It's also worthwhile noting that the term is only used in Proverbs and Psalms, which could imply a lyrical, poetic license rather than the rigid use of the term fool. Genesis chapter 8 verse 21 claims the intent of man's heart is evil from his youth. Not only does this never get translated to from birth, the term Nahor translates to youth or young man and is rooted in Nara, meaning to shake off or shake oneself free. This is not evil at birth, it's teenage rebellion, which I think we can all agree is nothing unusual. Then we have Psalm 14, verse 2 to 3. They have all turned aside. Together they have become corrupt. There is no one who does good, not even one. However, this does not imply anything about this being from birth. Even genuine websites do not give much information. One mentions the second verse of Ephesians chapter 2, but that only gives the context of people matching the sinful ways already in the world. The term huios in sons of disobedience is again a general descendant, not an child or infant. They also use Psalm 51 verse 5, implying we come into this world as sinners when, unless you write it in a weird way, it comes out to mean, behold, I was brought forth in iniquity, and in sin did my mother conceive me. Implying more the child was born out of wedlock or in sin. This being a song, it is hard to pin down, but this shows the amount of sin in the world. Even the later passages in Job 15, 14 to 16 and Jeremiah 17 verse 9 only show that humans are sinners, but despite this they claim that infants, being human, are by default sinful.
Classic fallacy of division.
This shows that we really don't understand sin. As I stated in an earlier video, sin is a deliberate act that affects a person negatively, either directly or indirectly. For example, if I was to leave this mug out and not wash it for my pregnant partner to clean out, that is essentially a sin, because I know full well I could do something about it. And it will just make her day a lot harder. She may love me, but it won't improve our relationship a ton. This implies that one must understand the act is wrong before they can sin. Children can be mischievous and cause chaos by this, but this is way later when they can choose to make those decisions themselves. And even then, unless their actions are done to deliberately negatively affect people, it is not a sin. None of these passages show any sign that children have any malice in their hearts. However, what they do show is that, like all people, they have the potential to do such. As someone who's on the verge of fatherhood and starting my own family, I know it's very easy to overlook the challenges of being pregnant, giving birth, the sleepless nights, and the chaos of everyday life, raising a mini version of me. Especially as the first two have a far worse impact on my partner rather than me, to the point where she has to take extra time off before she gives birth. God bless her soul. That is yet to happen, so hence why I'm still able to do videos at the moment. However, as any parent is like to say, you need to be prepared for this, and I've been trying to do that. Hence why I asked my partner originally to wait until we are able to support ourselves before we start planning a family. As some of you may know, that didn't quite work out, but hence why I had to put a lot of things aside whilst focusing entirely on making sure we had this flat. Thank God for that. Even now, it's going to be a challenge. And when they reach adolescence, it is likely to get harder when they will, odds are, challenge our beliefs, potentially pushing back our rules and going AWOL. In short, I had to remember having a child isn't going to be easy, and I do not take this lightly. It's not something I can go back on either without losing those I love. My family is very supportive of me and my partner in this case, but I know they will not be impressed about me abandoning a child because they haven't turned out the way I expected. That isn't right no matter which way you spin it. If they decide they don't want to be beholden to me, or they don't want my support in any way, I will leave them. But even then, they must show they can manage for themselves, or at least manage the basics. I know I will have to tell them no to stop them from potentially destroying the house. I also know that they could potentially turn out to be a person I do not like. Someone who is a terrible person, maybe even a killer or abuser. We all want to believe the best for our children in the future. But there's always a potential for things to go dark. Does this mean, even with the potential for great sin in their lives ahead of them, I should look at them at birth, in my partner's arms, and think that they're a vile piece of trash that deserves to burn? Absolutely not. And any father who does has no business being a father, as far as I'm concerned. Better not be born at all than born to a parent who hates them for having even the potential to sin. As someone who treats most driving situations as a risk, or look at it as a risk assessment, I know that if we see even a moderate risk as too much to go out, we wouldn't go out at all. We would never go anywhere. If we think like that in the case of original sin, the potential for sin is enough to condemn someone to fire and destruction in hell, then none of us deserve to go to heaven. Not only are we likely to sin, but odds are we already have sinned. The only difference is that we recognise that we are sinful and we want to change our ways. That's the important thing to remember. Some might say that we are stuck in the situation we are given, but that is not based on what we are, but what society has pushed us into. And that is very much something that us humans are responsible for. We cannot remove that from the equation. I don't deny the Bible doesn't show humans in a great light. But it never says that infants are just as sinful. The verses that people use to point that out merely remind us that we are responsible for making them good people and to keep them away from sin. It's not about marking them as sinners from their first cry, but recognizing that we have more influence on them than we understand, and we should use that wisely. Raising children is a challenge, and some of them will be more so due to one thing or another. But we mustn't let that lead us down the path of calling it sin just because they don't want to eat their greens. I mean, let's face it, who likes sprouts anyway? J. Mike took a concept that should be for reminding us that of the challenges of parenthood and made it into something perverse, just to imply that Christian teachings can only be detrimental to mankind, when in fact, when applied with compassion and understanding, they can help us raise the next generation of good, kind, God-loving people, Christ-like people. And they say we're the bigoted ones. As of yet, I can't speak as a parent, and I don't wish to speak in a turn, so if anyone with a child has anything to add to this, please do so in the comments. If there are enough, I might do a response to them, and we'll see what we can all learn together. And certainly I'm going to be using my family as an example of this as I go on in life, trying to use that to guide you through my videos, guide you through my mindsets as they grow. Until then, thanks so much for watching. Stay humble, stay safe, and God be with you, my friends.